A petition to make the Armed Forces pension tax-free has surpassed 20,000 signatures, but it won't include mine. Hey everyone, and welcome to The Savvy Squaddie. In this video, I'm going to explain my issues with the recent petition advocating for the Armed Forces pension scheme to be tax-free and why, in my opinion, it will be unsuccessful. Now, I have received quite a few messages from people asking me to sign and share this petition, and I have done neither, for reasons I will explain. But straight up, not signing doesn't mean I'm against more money in our pockets. Some might assume that if they emote instead of think. I mean, who wouldn't love tax-free anything? However, if someone wants me to get behind something, then I need to know what I'm getting behind, and more importantly, why. This petition fails to do that. So what is the petition? Well, it was started in mid-August by John Almond, and will run for 6 months until February 2026, and it seeks to make the Armed Forces pension tax-free. On the surface, it's an appealing idea that pulls at our emotions. You'd be foolish not to sign it, right? But for those of us who like to think before we act, this doesn't hold up to scrutiny at all. I want to be clear, my issue is not with the idea of tax-free pensions, but instead, it's with the petition's weak approach and execution. Let me explain. Looking at the petitions page, there is the action that John has stated at the top. This is what he wants the government to do, and that is make the Armed Forces pension tax-free. Cool, no major issues with that, it's relatively clear and concise. The next portion, the reasoning section, is where John should explain more about what he wants the government to do. He has stated, make the Armed Forces pension at age 60 tax-free. So straight away he hasn't provided any reasoning. He has just restated the action he wants with the addition of an age qualifier. If anything, this has raised more questions like, why age 60? What happens to those on the 75 scheme who receive an immediate pension when leaving, often in their 40s? Or those who claim their deferred pension early at age 55, will they have to pay tax up until 60? This age qualifier contradicts the action that John is hoping the government will take, because Armed Forces pensions can be in payment before the age of 60. Surely, if you were going to advocate for the Armed Forces pensions to be tax-free, you would want even application across the schemes? This contradiction damages the credibility of the petition, and it also highlights John's lack of understanding of our pension schemes and how they work. Additionally, this section allows up to 300 characters to tell the government more about what you want them to do. John's single-line explanation uses 49 characters, leaving 251 unused. This section is supposed to be used for backing up why you want action. A single short sentence in no way does this, and it's a wasted opportunity. But also, John doesn't even explain the why, he reiterates the action he wants with the addition of a contradictory age qualifier. Now, this petition has secured over 10,000 signatories, meaning the government will respond. But genuinely, why should this petition be taken seriously by the government when John hasn't even put the effort in to explain his reasoning behind the action he wants them to take? This is so obviously emotionally motivated rather than grounded in clear facts or logic that could actually sway policy. But maybe I'm being unfair on John. Perhaps he's done that under the more details section. Okay, let's just click here and we think this would balance out what we see as an injustice. Oh f***ing hell. Right, before I dissect this, a bit of context. When creating a petition, the justification section allows up to 500 characters. John's single sentence uses 60 of them, whilst optional, in here is a good place to include background information, evidence and references. You know, things that actually strengthen your argument, make it credible and show you're serious. John has not done this, and again, more questions are raised. We think this would balance out what we see as an injustice. Firstly, who is we? Are you referring to the collective who signed the petition, or a group of veterans who perhaps thought up the idea, or a specific organisation? The lack of clarity on who the stakeholders are weakens the persuasive power and legitimacy of this petition. This is not helped further using the word think. This implies uncertainty and opinion rather than confidence and evidence. This speculative tone undermines the petition and makes it easier for the government to not take this seriously. Next up, injustice. This is vague and undefined, like what injustice? Be specific. Using emotive and vague language will rally support from those caught up in the emotional appeal of their pension being tax-free, but it will do nothing to sway the minds of policymakers. Specifics are required, and this lack of clarity makes the petition unconvincing. The use of the word "see" frames the injustice as a perception held by the petitioners and not an objective fact. This subjectivity weakens the argument. For government to instigate change, they will require data and reasoning, not perceived vague injustices. The phrase "balance out" is also unclear. Does it mean financially balance out, morally balance out, or something else? Because the injustice hasn't been specified, it's impossible to say where the imbalance is and how the pension becoming tax-free fixes that. Again, no data provided to substantiate this claim. This petition relies heavily on emotional appeal rather than objective reasoning. Whilst that works for getting signatures, it does not work for policymakers who will rely on data and evidence, all things John has failed to include. I have not signed this petition because John has failed to articulate and provide substantiated arguments as to why, specifically, the armed forces pension should be tax-free. And I'm not letting emotions or the lure of personal gain get the better of me when the case lacks clear facts and logic. Don't get me wrong, I'd love more money in my pocket, a reason I suspect why most people are signing it, but that's not enough for me. The injustice isn't explained, the age 60 qualifier doesn't make sense across schemes, and there is no data to show why this is needed. Signing it would feel like jumping on an emotional bandwagon driven by wishful thinking, not reason, and that's likely to get ignored, like past petitions. In 2017, a similar petition garnered almost 64,000 signatures, and you can see here they've made good use of their reasoning and justification sections. However, the whole thing is based on completely inaccurate information. At no point were the pensions of the police or the fire service 100% non-taxable. This is just not true, but I bet a bunch of people thought it was after they signed it. You can see this petition was closed early due to the general election, but towards the end of 2018, a new one popped up to take its place. This time, there was just some reasoning and no justification. It did not perform as well as its predecessor, accumulating nearly 20,000 signatures, but again, based on completely incorrect information. At least the previous one had a bit more detail, this one just chins it off. Both show a pattern. Sloppy reasoning using inaccurate information doesn't just weaken a petition, it misleads people who sign it. Like the current petition, with its vague injustice and odd age qualifier, these efforts fall flat without solid facts to back them up. Now, let's talk about why pensions are taxed, because this is key to understanding the petition and why it's likely to fail. Simply put, pensions are deferred income, and income gets taxed. For most pensions, when you pay into your pot, you get tax relief, so those contributions aren't taxed as income. The pot grows tax-free over decades while invested. When you start getting your pension, it's taxed as income just like a salary. Pension deposits are not taxed on the way in, but they're taxed on the way out. The reverse is true for ISAs, where deposits are from income that has already been taxed, so then when you withdraw your money from an ISA, it's tax-free. But that's why the petition's call for tax-free pensions needs to be a strong case. It's asking to provide an exemption to a standard tax rule that applies to everyone without any clear evidence or justification. Also, as a side note, you can already take 25% of your pension tax-free as a lump sum. Important to note, the Armed Forces pension is a unique public service pension scheme because serving personnel do not contribute a portion of their salary to it. It's 100% funded by the MOD. So we don't receive tax relief as we don't pay into our pension from our salary. The non-contributory status of our pension scheme is a huge benefit, and one the government has already said recognises the tremendous commitment and sacrifice that armed forces personnel make in the defence of our country. So trying to use that as justification for it to be tax-free won't cut it either, and I imagine there will be a similar line or phrase in their response this time round too. If we rule out that line of reasoning then, there will need to be an argument as to why the armed forces pension should be tax-free over the police or the fire service or nurses, etc. Seeing as this move would then set a precedent which I'm sure the others would try to follow, meaning the government would lose out on even more tax revenue. If we look at our allies, they tax it as income too. Certain states in the US do provide exemptions, and this is in part to attract and incentivize veterans to live in those areas, but it is still taxed at the federal level regardless of what state they live in. But perhaps this incentive approach is how the petition should have been framed instead of playing the victim card. In a time where both recruitment and retention in the military is struggling, the prospect of a non-contributory pension, which is tax-free upon payment, is quite attractive. Certainly would help with retention. Do a full career and your pension is tax-free. I mean, yes please. As for recruitment, not sure it would have the same effect as many people joining nowadays aren't doing so for the pension, but I personally believe it's a better approach and one I could see myself getting behind, provided the reasoning and justification is strong. As I said at the start, my issue is not with the idea, it's with the approach and execution. The petition comes across as an echo chamber of emotional gripes, not a solid argument backed by data. In summary, John is asking the government to permanently forego an, albeit small, portion of their tax revenue on armed forces pensions and has provided absolutely zero evidence or data to justify why they should do that. It's like asking your boss for time off and loo because you feel you deserve it without providing proof of extra duties or additional sacrifices, etc. They're not going to approve it without a solid case, and the government won't give up tax revenue just because it sounds nice. Although a political party might use the prospect to gain some votes. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm happy for my mind to be changed, and undoubtedly a number of you will be saying that I'm thinking too much into this and should just sign it. But that's not going to happen. I'm not going to endorse such a poorly proposed petition. But if you have a strong position on the topic, then please lay your case down below in the comments. I would generally be interested in seeing your points, and I'll be curious to see how the government respond. If you made it to the end of this video, then thank you. I'm sure the comments will be entertaining on this one. How dare I go against the groupthink and be rational? Have you signed this petition? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. If you liked what you just saw, please hit the subscribe button up there. And if you want to see some more videos, click over there. See you soon.